Good afternoon and welcome to Arlington Cooks. I'm David Morrison. Today's video will demonstrate how to make a vegetable quiche with a savory butter crust. So with no further ado, let's get going. Alright, so when you're making a butter crust, the first thing you start with are your dry ingredients. Here I have a cup and a quarter, 1 1/4 cups of white flour, all-purpose. A tablespoon of herb de Provence. This can also be a tablespoon of basil. It could be a tablespoon of oregano. It could be a tablespoon of any kind of dried herb you want to. I have this on hand. I tend to like it, so it's a tablespoon of this, and a teaspoon of salt. The original recipe did not call for that, called for half a teaspoon of salt. I live in a house where people tend to like salt, so I added more salt. You don't have to. Alright, so once we get the flour and the salt and the herbs mixed together well, this is where you take your butter. This is 6 tablespoons of sweet butter, not salted, that's been kept cold. I've sliced it up into cubes, put it back in the refrigerator so it stays cold. And what you're going to do is drop these one by one into the flour mixture, trying to make sure that each of them is incorporated completely before you drop in the next one. You want the butter distributed throughout the flour in small chunks. You don't want to have it be melted in there, because it's that cold flour and the chunks of the flour, of the butter and the flour, so you give your crust the flakiness you'll get when you cut into it after it's baked. I could hold my hand up if I could. You can see this. I don't know if you could or not. So you get a chance to see what this looks like. You can see it's got a kind of a granular texture to it. It's like flour still, but it's not. It's not. And there are no real huge hunks of butter in it. Just the very small chunks of butter and a uniform small butter throughout the flour. Dust the flour off my hands. All right. So the next step in the process is your wet ingredients, which are pretty simple in this case. They're an egg. There you are. And 2 teaspoons of ice water. You want to use ice water because, again, the whole point of this is to keep everything fair. Just mix up the egg like this. Alright, when you do this, you want to do this in roughly thirds. So, it's about a third. Now you let this mix until it starts to pull away from the sides. And gather a little bit on the paddle. Right. It starts to do that. You stop it. Bring the paddle up, and you see you'll have all this batter, not batter, but all this dough, tart dough, crust dough on your paddle. Take that all off like that. Alright, take the paddle off and reach down and grab it. You can use it to make sure you gather up any crumbs that might be in the bottom. You want to get all of it as much as you can, because this is going to be the dough you're going to use for your tart or your quiche. And you're not going to knead it. It's important not to handle it too much, but you want to get it to be a disc. Alright, like that. And then you're going to cover it with something and put it in the refrigerator, where it's going to sit in the refrigerator for at least half an hour, and really, if possible, a couple or 3 hours if you can. So that's the first stage of making a butter crust. Okay everyone, back to the next stage in how to make a vegetable quiche and the butter crust. I've got my disc of dough. It's been in the refrigerator for a couple hours now, and what I'm doing now is I'm putting it between two sheets of parchment paper. This is probably the biggest single innovation in how I handle dough these days. I used to use flour to keep it from sticking, and it used to make a mess, and they used to get extra flour in the dough, and it was a big hassle. Don't do that anymore. The parchment paper works great, and I'll show you why in a second. So, just out of the fridge, first thing you want to do is use your rolling pin to kind of tap it a couple times and get it going. Alright, so after you roll it out for a bit, what you want to do is, when you think it's getting to be about the right size, you take your pan. This is a 10-inch quiche pan, and you want to just set it on the dough so you can see. Ideally, you have enough dough laid out so you've got some overhang on all the sides of the pan. Now this is a marble rolling pin. I use that for the weight and also because it stays colder. But that does not work as well for this next step, which is where basically you simply carefully, very patiently roll the dough off the paper and hang it off the rolling pin. So then you're able to come in like this and roll it back out again so that it lays into the pan. Alright, it's not going to be perfect. It's not going to be on there perfectly. It's going to have parts that are not enough and parts that are overhanging. All that's good. Don't worry about it, because what you're going to do in a second is come through, take those overhanging parts off, and put them where there wasn't enough. So here, alright, your last step is to, in this part of this process, take a fork, regular fork, and just come in like so, poke holes in the bottom, and poke holes in the sides. And you're going, why are you doing that? You just made this dough, put it in the pan, you're putting all these holes in it. Because when you do this, for the next stage, which is what they call a pre-bake, it will keep the dough from pulling away from the sides too much. So that's why you do that. Now this is going back in the refrigerator again for about 20 minutes or so while you wait for your oven to preheat. Okay, once you preheat the oven to 400 degrees, you take a piece of Reynolds wrap or other aluminum foil, press it into your quiche pan or your pie plate or your tart pan, and then these are actually ceramic pie weights, and they're just they're little pieces of ceramic that are useful because what you're going to do is you're going to pour them into your pan here, spread them out evenly, and they're going to help keep the dough from pulling away from the sides, like I said before, otherwise not turning out right. So once you've done that and done the thing, you're ready to stick it into the oven. All right, while your quiche shell is pre-baking, this is the time to get your vegetables ready. So I'll start with a pan that I've been heating for a little bit. I throw in about a tablespoon or a bit more of butter. Let it kind of swish around a little bit. Get melted. All right. And here onions and leeks and carrots and shallots. So you just put all those into the pan and stir them occasionally. Let them cook down and get soft. So it's been about 7 minutes or so. I don't know how much you can tell on camera, but this is these have gotten significantly smaller in volume. They've lost they're not nearly as crisp, and actually if you taste into the carrots, for example, you'd find them to be quite soft. Not mushy, but definitely softer. Alright, so while the vegetables are cooking, you next want to do your custard for the quiche. This is 2/3 of a cup of cream. There we go. One egg. There we go. And 1 egg yolk. Now with a whisk or just a plain fork, you beat those at egg yolk and cream together. Make sure they're all mixed up together well. Alright, so now we're ready to start assembling this quiche. So just spoon those into the quiche pan. Even at this stage, I gotta say, it smells really good. Now, one thing I did too, I'm not sure if I made it onto the camera, is I added a couple of pinches of salt and some pepper to the vegetables as they were cooking. So you should feel free to season to taste as you're going along. Alright, once they're in there, you take your custard and you carefully pour it in. You try to pour it evenly. This should almost, but not quite, fill the pan. Alright. Take your spoon and push down any vegetables that seem like they're way over the top. And then put it into a 400-degree oven for 20 minutes. So here we are. It's been baking for about 20 minutes in a 400-degree oven. And I expect there were probably a few of you who, when I put it in the oven a few minutes ago, were saying to yourselves, where's the cheese? Well, on this recipe, I didn't just forget it. On this recipe, the cheese goes on last. So this is a mix of different cheeses I have in the house. Fontina works well with this, Gruyere works well with this, Cheddar works well with this, or a mixture of these cheeses that you might have around. The recipe calls for about a cup and a half. I use about a cup and a half, but you can use a bit more if you want. There you go. And then you take it and put it back. So here it is, fresh from the oven. Thank you for coming to Arlington Cooks, and thank you for watching how to make a vegetable quiche. Have a good day. Bye-bye.